Thanks for tuning in. Just wanted to take a second to let y'all know I am now an Amazon affiliate. So any shopping you plan on doing through Amazon, visit strangerencounterspodcast.com and go through the affiliate link. If you prefer, you can donate at Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Thomas D. Salmons and you can donate. Help keep the show up and running. Thanks. Welcome to Stranger Encounters. I am Tommy Salmons. Today's guest is Richard Grove. I asked Richard to join me to talk about John Taylor Gatto and an upcoming project that Richard has in the works. I think you'll get a lot of information here. Richard is nothing short of a fountain of knowledge. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Richard Grove about John Taylor Gatto, Figures of History 2.
We are ready for takeoff.
All right. I'm here with Richard Grove, the author, not author, but runs the Tragedy and Hope website. Has a peace
not very well
podcast.
Either.
I just spent this morning before we got together. I just spent this morning posting show notes for my last 4 episodes, so don't feel bad.
To tell you the truth, I'm kind of embarrassed when people go to tragedyandhope.com because it's like the last place I post any of my work. I post it first for my subscribers in our community on Patreon, and then I might hit a couple other sites. But the interesting thing, since you brought it up, you spent time uploading a bunch of shows this morning. One of the common things that I've seen among myself and the peers that I work with, my colleagues, is that we produce content, we spend a lot of time uploading it, and then that's kind of it's a time sucker, right? I'd rather produce something, upload it once, have it go everywhere I want it to go, multiple platforms, minds.com, or Facebook, YouTube, wherever, right? All these different places that are available. And then we can broaden our reach. And I saw Mance Raider doing that. Like when Pete was posting on Twitter, he'd be like, here it is on Minds, here it is on Libertarian Institute, here it is on my podcast page. And I'm thinking that's great because you're getting reach and it gives you greater visibility for people to be able to see what you're doing. But it also takes us a lot of time. So not right now, but in the future, there's going to be a launch. I got a couple of buddies that are making a company that does that thing, and they're working with a bunch of libertarian type people, Ernie Hancock and some of those people you might know. So I mentioned it to Pete when we talked in the pre-show, I think, for one of those interviews. But I also just wanted to throw it out there for you before because, hey, you're taking time, you're putting wisdom together, you're getting it out there. You shouldn't have to spend a whole bunch of time like getting it all over the place. So when that launches, I'll make sure you can get in the beta program and try that out.
Awesome. Yeah, it is one of those, like you said, it's a time sucker. And it took me probably about 4 months to figure out how to get my podcast to automatically upload to YouTube without having to convert it from an MP3 to video, and that would take, I don't know, that usually took about 6 hours just the conversion process. So I would do that overnight, and I would come back the next morning, and then I'd start posting in it and scheduling it for Monday mornings. And it was, like you said, it was very much a time sucker. And
and I was going to try to do that, but then I found out YouTube has a limit on how long of a video you can upload. So I tried to upload the audio for a 20-hour podcast with just like a static picture, and it was like, no, the limit on YouTube is 12 hours, kid. Sorry about that.
Wow. Wow.
And I was like, well, this is why I haven't done it, because it's not the right format for sharing my podcast, although it would be convenient for some people. But
right.
So how you doing today, Tommy?
I am doing well. I am getting ready to get on the road. Got a lot of stuff to do. So we gotta sit down and talk about John Taylor Gatto for a little bit, and then I have to go do that blue collar job of mine.
Well, that's good. That's good, because during that blue collar job of yours, you continue to feed your mind with healthy, nutritious information, right?
Yeah, well, if I didn't, I'd be wasting my time, wouldn't I?
Yeah, kind of trading time for money. That's what we're taught to do. But as we're going to talk about with Gatto, maybe what we're taught to do is the opposite of what makes us successful in life.
It is quite possible, and that leads me to one of the biggest realizations whenever I began looking into Gatto and the way he approached education, was that he was actually interested in his students' autonomy and his students' ability to pursue what the subjects and careers that they were really interested in. And I really found that admirable, because you don't get that much nowadays. It really feels like the education system, the people that are employed as educators, are just interested in running it as if it's a conveyor and just pushing children out as fast as possible. And it's not to say all of them.
That's interesting that you said it that way, because one of the last pieces that John wrote before he passed away, so this was October 2018, it's called The Conveyor Belt of Modern Schooling, and basically showing that it's a mass production line. That's going to be a forward in a book by Connor Boyack. It's coming out maybe this summer or this fall. But that's what he was talking about. John was pointing exactly the way you phrased it. Like, that was the epitome of what he's saying. And so let me break it down for you. The first off, John Taylor Gatto, the Who. He was born in 1935, December 12th, 1935. He was a New York City school teacher that was his profession. Prior to that, he had gone to Columbia, Cornell, I think. Yeah, Cornell, definitely. Mm-hmm. And a couple other colleges. So he had a very well-rounded double Ivy League education. And he ended up teaching in the New York City school system. And the funny thing about the New York City school system is there's a wide diversity of students to be schooled in their systems. So John found himself working a couple days a week up in Harlem, and he worked a couple days a week down on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And there's a great disparity, wealth gap between those two populations. And so what John noticed was that these students were being taught differently according to their projected or proposed stations in life. You got these rich kids, they're learning Shakespeare. You got these kids in Harlem, they're getting the short end, the short shrift on any type of education. Right. So John starts hypothesizing. Well, what if we took this curriculum from here and put it over here? What does it look like when kids in Harlem learn to do Shakespeare? These sort of things, right? Mm-hmm. So he has this career where he's showing individuals, because that's how he saw them. He saw them as young adults, individuals who were supposed to be self-reliant upon graduation, survive and thrive in the world. He also saw that the things that they needed to do to be successful, they weren't being taught in school, and they weren't even allowed to be taught these things in school. So what he did was he would find their passion, find their interest, connect it to some activities that involved experiential learning. A lot of those experiential learning circumstances involved communication with strangers. You know, you might have to go get an apprenticeship with somebody, or you might have to go see how, or shadow somebody at work all day at a newspaper and see how a newspaper is put together, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of interesting things that he did. And finally, in 1991, he resigned on the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal. And his message to people was, I quit, I think. And basically what he said was he refused to participate in breaking people's lives, breaking students' will, breaking their ideas, their dreams, breaking their connections with reality by filling their heads with nonsense and noise and not signal. So John was, at the time of his retirement, he was the New York City School Teacher of the Year. He was the New York State School Teacher of the Year. And he basically used that platform to step out and draw attention to the schooling system's broken and it's not accidental. He then rented Carnegie Hall in New York City. He got himself a tuxedo and he stood in front of a crowd of people. He delivered his message about schooling. He then wrote several books on these topics. He wrote Dumbing Us Down, I believe, in 1992. He wrote Underground History of American Education in 2001. He wrote Weapons of Mass Instruction in 2008. And he wrote some other small books sprinkled within there. And the question that arises is why? Why did this guy do this? Why in a world, in the country, with a whole bunch of other teachers, why was it that man, John Taylor Gatto, was able to be like, hey, there's something wrong here, and here's what it is? So, to answer that question, let's look at where he was brought up. He was brought up outside of Pittsburgh, 1930s, 1940s, Great Depression era, steel mill town. Very dingy, very dirty, very scruffy, blue collar, roughneck type of area. Here's a guy who grew up autonomous, playing by the river, being free, right? And then he has to move from Western Pennsylvania to East Coast living, going to Cornell, going to Columbia, being in New York City, seeing how the world really works. These sorts of things, right? So the why of Gatto, I think he comes from a time where he came from people of grit, with integrity, who knew how to work hard. They didn't know too much about money and how to invest and these sort of things. They knew a simple life and they knew how to appreciate it with gratitude, right? So this is the message that he spread throughout his work. My interactions with Gatto, you said that at first you heard his name, but you didn't really get what he was doing. I was the same way. I heard his name. I heard that you had to read this book, Underground History of American Education, and it gives you all the answers. And it was the answers to the questions that I was asking. But at the time, this was like 2004, I didn't understand the answers in the context. I didn't have the context to understand the answers yet. I had to do more research over years before I found the value in his book. So when I got the book, Underground History of American Education, it's a big book. It's like larger than regular size paper. It's like a big, heavy, thick book. And the format and the font and the way it's expressed is not like other books. And so I just had trouble intaking and internalizing the information without the context. So from 2004 to like maybe 2008, I'm doing a bunch of research trying to figure out who are they, them, those that want to take away people's freedom across the planet. Who has the plan? Who has the funding? How are they doing this? What are the working groups? All the essentials of, hey, there's an enemy acting against us. Maybe we should identify the enemy and figure out what that is. And if we have a role in empowering that enemy, maybe we can cut those connections, right? Right. So the same year that I got Underground History of American Education, that was also the first year that I voted Libertarian. I voted for Michael Badnarik in the presidential election. It was also the last time I ever voted, because then I figured out how the whole system works, and I was like, I'm not going to participate in that. So we get up to like 2008. I reread. I'm like, oh, wait, I have that book on my shelf. I found one of his articles online that tied into something I'd already researched, and then I started putting everything together. So I went back and read his Underground History of American Education. I was like, this guy's got it right. He's figured it out. But I didn't have so by then I had the context. I can understand the value, right? And that's what a lot of people who read his book and don't get it don't understand. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to be built out to kind of understand that perspective entirely and not have it all bounce off you. But once I was like, okay, there's a group of people that want to control us. Check. I know about them. Now, how did they control us? They went into the education system systematically, over 100 years, using nonprofit foundations and governmental elements, and they totally corrupted the series of components, the recipe for freedom, if you will, for self-reliance that would give you real self-esteem and real self-confidence. And if without those things, you become a super consumer, always trying to buy stuff to fill your vacancy. And the vacancy is the self-confidence, which comes from skills and experience in education. So if they take that out, they call it schooling, They give you 15,000 hours of your best learning years, and they focus you not on what you need to survive and thrive in the world. They're like, here's the indoctrination you need to be able to not resist the status quo. And that's basically what it is. So Gatto had this quote in he had a quote in Weapons of Mass Instruction from 2008, and it said that basically you don't have control over your life until you start using your choices, and you don't have choices till you inform yourself of what's really available. So his quote was, if you don't learn how to write your own script in life, you're always going to be participating in someone else's script that they've written for you. And that's how most people find themselves. The school system is a script that someone else wrote for you. University system, same thing. Then you get that paper degree and you hope you get a job and you hope you can pay your loans, right? And everyone's sold on that system from the get-go. There was no sales pitch. There was no landing page. There was no special offer to get that. That's just rote. It's just like default. That's just what people do. And they don't mind that they go in debt $100,000 or more and don't get any results out of it. They don't mind that. They don't go back to the university and say, hey, can I get my money back? Didn't work out, right? There's no guarantee from the university. So people are already getting the shaft. The school system is the source of that. The mainstream media reinforces that and keeps people in that scarcity, fear, control, easily controlled mindset, right?
Right.
So, by this point, like 2008, 2009, I wanted to track Gatto down and get him on film. But at that point, I didn't know how to get on film. I didn't know how to be a filmmaker yet. So aspirations turn into inclinations, turn into momentum. And before you knew it, a couple years later, I could do lights, camera, microphone, action, and do an interview with them.
That's awesome. And that's how y'all met, was whenever you were filming the Ultimate History Lesson? That was the first time y'all had met?
Yeah, I met him the night before that, like around 10 or 11 o'clock is when he flew in. And prior to that, so I tried to track him down, email. He's traveling the world at that point because I think he had been to like 90 countries speaking between the time he retired and the time I caught up with him. So he's like a globetrotter. He's all over the place, traveling, speaking, doing his thing. So he's a hard guy to get a hold of. And finally I got this call. It was like after a good 6 months of letters, emails, whatever, because I had no fear of like rejection. I was like, if this guy's just not seeing the offer, that's all. He just needs to see, look, because the whole thing was his work's brilliant, but what was available on the internet was bad audio, bad video. Like, it was poor quality. That's not how it needed to be preserved for the future. Like, the future needed a showcase of what this guy found. So finally he calls me up and he's like, Richard, I want to come up there to Hartford. So I plan on going to New York and just filming him in his apartment or whatever. Because I had seen a video. I'm like, oh, we could film in his apartment. See right there in the video, they're in his place. He wanted to come up, and then he's like, I got to fly up, and here's the deal. And so then I was like, I don't have a budget for this. And I talked it over with my wife. She's like, we don't have a budget. We don't have the money for this. And I was like, we don't have the money not to do this. We need to just say, yes, John, we're going to make it. Yeah, let's schedule this. We're going to make it work. And I did that. And then within like 24 hours, I just asked my subscribers and my podcast listeners, and everyone chipped in a little bit. So I think everyone that was an associate producer on the Ultimate History Lesson got a handmade 4-disc set that I made. And I think I had to make like 1,000 of those. Nice. So people chip in a little, and they got a disc set. And that's how I funded that interview and the post-production that took 6 months and but it's still available today on Amazon, and people that don't want the disc set, you can see it on YouTube. I think like 200,000 people have seen it on there. And it's like a gift that keeps on giving, because it was like 2 days in his life, but those were the right 2 days to talk to him because he was present. He was fully there. And a couple weeks later, he suffered a stroke, and he really wasn't the same again.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the most substantive interviews I've ever heard in my life. And when I was talking, you talk about certain people, and we were discussing Rothbard earlier in the episode I'd done last week. We were talking about Scott Horton earlier, and I put John Taylor Gatto right up there as just being a walking encyclopedia. You can just give him a topic, and he could go on and give you the history and references and turn it into, basically a college level lecture in which you're absorbing so much information you don't even know where to store it, in the amount of time that it's coming at you. And I've just found that so intriguing and so interesting about the man. And
well, it inspires you to do likewise and shows you that you can do likewise.
Right.
People, the school system's there to. Let's just talk about school system for a second. It's not there to educate you. It's not there to embolden your life through liberty type of education. It's there to amputate your curiosity. It's there to teach you learned helplessness. It's there to make sure that you're shy and you have a fear of public speaking, and that all these things that could be liberating and igniting your potential are cauterized. Mm-hmm. They don't want that to develop. Well, I think what John did was, through his actions, he not only told us about it, but he's also, here's the solution, by the way. He's you guys can get books too. You can read, and so that just doing the editing for the Ultimate History lesson, when I had to do those 1,000 footnotes for all the things he said, then a lot of us went and got all those books. So a lot of the books that he talks about, I have in my library now, and I know where the information is in those books. That is that's the evidence that he's talking about. So it wasn't just let him tell his message. It's also let's figure out what he said, where that information is, and how to carry that knowledge into the future in such a way that people can see it and be oh, Woodrow Wilson really did say this, right? Because I have his private papers, and they're in first edition from Yale. That's the official, Woodrow Wilson said this, or Colonel House, or all these other characters that John talks about throughout the history. The reason that they have to hide that from us is because if we knew the truth, we would act differently, and therefore they have to deceive us and lie to us about these things. But the point about people's potential just withering because of the school system is the thing I think we can all do something about. And just seeing a guy like John do what he does inspired 2 or 3% of the audience to be wait a minute, I could do stuff like that too. Right. And at some point he was a teacher and he saw some guy who had retired teaching and wrote a book, and he's probably oh, wait, I could do that. Right. So all these people that we admire how they used their time and what they did and the value they provided to us, they also went through these same journeys similar to what we're going through as far as transitional stages of how do we deliver value and knowledge to people in such a way that they can actually put it to use, and it just doesn't bounce off them, or it sounds nice, but I don't know how it applies in my life type of stuff. It's right. So the people manipulating from top down, they know what they're doing. They're well funded, and when they took over education, they knew exactly what they were doing to children. They're attacking the least among us to indoctrinate them so that they wouldn't resist ever increasing tyranny and despotism. And somehow people like myself, you, Pete Raymond, Scott Horton, we resist that. We say, wait a minute, my compass is tuned to freedom.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a second ago when you were talking about how he had gone to Cornell and all these Ivy League universities, and my first thought was those of us that are freedom lovers, including John Taylor Gatto, are failures of the school system. We're failures of their system. We did not turn out the way that they expected us to turn out. The way that their system is designed to push us out and create, specific functions. John Taylor Gatto was never intended, when he was going to these Ivy League universities, it was never intended that he go and he try to teach young people about freedom. Never was it intended that, like you said, he go into Harlem and teach Shakespeare. He was intended to stick to the curriculum. And one of the most remarkable stories, and I'm probably going to get this slightly wrong because I'm really bad at making sure that everything goes together in my head properly. But one of the most amazing stories was he was talking about one of the kids in his class that was into comic books, and he would never pay attention in class. And instead of scolding him and putting the kid in detention or any of these things, he went and he saw what the kid was doing, and he said, "You're doing it wrong. Go spend a month at the library researching how the comic books are drawn up, and come back and present me a full comic book for your grade." And he taught the kid to pursue his passion. Have you had any contact with any of the students that he participated with like this?
No, but there are a few people. I think my wife Lisa knows a couple people on Facebook who had come out of the woodwork either when John passed away or earlier in the last couple of years. There's been a couple people that have been his students in the past, and they wanted to reach out. And I think most of those came through the fundraiser we did for John's wife right after he passed away, because the situation was that John had an executor of his will. It was a lifetime friend of his, and that guy passed away right before John went in the hospital, like 6 months. So they hadn't transitioned the paperwork, and then once John went in the hospital, it went into limbo. So as soon as he passed away, the question was, like, how do we get the estate transferred to his wife so she can start getting the royalties from his books and pay her rent? Because they still have an apartment in New York. And even though it's rent controlled, it's still like $3,000 a month or something.
Right. And how did that turn out? Were you able to were y'all able to raise enough money for his wife to take possession?
Oh yeah. I think it was within 48 hours we raised $8,000 for her, and it went directly to her, and she was able to pay her attorney, and that all moved forward, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief. And it happened right before Christmas, so it was like perfect timing. It was nice, because sometimes money doesn't solve the situation, but in that case it was like, oh, we can just go let people know, and people who found value in John's work, because that's what John would say. Like, he comes from a background, when we would try to help him out, he'd say he and his wife are of a Scotch-Irish work ethic of that accepting help makes you weaker, right?
Right.
And like these sort of things. And finally, I had to tell him, it's like, this was several years after he'd had a stroke and he's bedridden at home. I was like, look, dude, the people that are contributing, you're not going in debt to them. You don't owe them anything. They're paying you back for what you've done in their lives. They read your books. They homeschooled their kids. They changed their families because of your work. So when they send you $100 or they buy you a little something, whatever you need for your place, that's them giving to you without any expectations. And then he smiled and he's like, okay, then that's cool. So he just wanted to, he liked to, he was a good character. He liked to keep it real. And,
well,
he appreciated people who would listen, not because he liked to be listened to, but because he knew that knowledge is how you preserve freedom into the future. Right. There was one point, I every 8 weeks or every two months or so, for last year or so, I'd go and cut his hair. And there's this one story that he was telling, and we filmed it, but it's not really fit for public release. But he tells this story about how it took thousands and thousands of years for freedom, as we know it in America, imperfect as it is, to emerge. And that, if people don't do something about it right now, the existing plan that's in place and well-funded and, already has a lot of momentum, is to eradicate that permanently and use technology as a buffer between they, them, those who want to rule people and the rest of the population, which is to be enslaved. And I just think that the universe and nature did not put human beingness here with consciousness in order to be slaves forever. I think this is just a testing point. I think it had to get a certain amount of bad for certain people to be able to wake up and start getting other people to say, hey, wait a minute. These types of tyranny and despotism that we're experiencing can only get this bad if we let it. And we let it get this bad because of function of the school system, dumbing everybody down and making us all think we're helpless and learning that we can't do anything. That's not learning. That's conditioning. That's indoctrination. So I think it had to get bad enough for people to start waking up to it. But once it becomes evident, that trend reverses very naturally and tones itself down. We can never eradicate evil or despotism and these types of things on the planet entirety, We'll never have entirety of peace, because freedom, the nature of that is you can resist types of infringements on your private property, right? So it's a flux, but we can definitely tune down the corruption and the evil and all these things that we have seen get out of control. Like if I said the first 20 years of the 21st century have been Grand Theft World. Like these people are stealing our future as fast as they can, and everybody just sits around and they're like, let's watch Netflix. You know? Yeah. So we're in the midst of a real change, and that change can go the wrong way if nobody does anything conscious. But I also see the old system waning, and it's attempting to maintain control over people who are just lifting off, and they're like, we're outside your gravity now. You know, we're over here now.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons I asked you about his students is because, and you kind of got into this just a second ago, is because of the impact. I've seen so much of the impact, and just listening to you and how passionate you are about him and the way he opened your eyes to freedom, and to how he opened your eyes to the things that the way that the school system was designed, and I can really hear that you're really impassioned by him, and that he made a really big impact on your life. And I know he's made an impact on so many other people's lives that maybe didn't study under him directly. But I really am curious as to how the people that were given the opportunity to go ride with truck drivers, or to go intern as a student, as a young student, or to take a month and draw a comic book, or to get the what was it, John Lennon memorial in Central Park or whatever.
Strawberry Fields.
Yeah, there you go. And how that really truly impacted their lives on a whole, how that changed the direction completely of the path that they were already going down, and if they really experienced a true change, and how drastic that change was over their lifetime, and how it impacted them. And I really find that interesting.
Well, I think what he just showed them is you can go off path.
Right.
Like there's a yellow brick road that they have paved to their land of Oz and their wizard, or you can go off path. Go wherever you want. You just have to know how to use your map and your compass. And if you don't have a map and you have a compass, find somebody else with a map, right? There's other people out there trying to do similar things. Learn how to communicate with them, get your needs met in a way that doesn't involve violence or theft.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and I just can't help but imagine that some of these kids that like and I keep going back to this example, but like the comic book, maybe he wasn't going to do so well in school, and maybe he wasn't going to graduate, with honors or accomplish a whole lot going out of school, because he didn't have the attention span for the education system, and the education system is, made to kill the creativity. And so how would his life been different, as he had aged? And would he have been one of these statistics of children that going in and out of prison, from the age of like 16 or 17 years old for the rest of his life? And did it change his life in such a way that he was able to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish and be a success by his own measure in life? And I think that's really interesting. And
yeah, that would be interesting. But what we know is that what John did gave that kid an opportunity. Yeah. We don't know what that kid did with the opportunity. I mean, I'm pretty sure he did his assignment because John wrote about it afterwards. Did he apply that as a life skill? Did he use that to learn, hey, maybe I got knocked off this conveyor belt of schooling as a favor, right?
Right.
I remember the first time I saw the Pink Floyd video, Another Brick in the Wall, where the kids go through the meat grinder. And I was kind of shocked by that. Whoa. Yeah. But after you read John's books, you're like, oh, maybe Pink Floyd was like tapping his phones back then. I don't know. It's like a John Taylor Gatto in the 70s. I don't know. Maybe he was under FBI surveillance and they leaked some of those tapes over to the Pink Floyd MI6 studios, however that works. And they're like, hey, guys, dig this, right? John could have been talking about like, here it is, and they're like, this is a perfect metaphor. Put it in the album and sell it to everybody. I don't know how those things work, but I'm sure that John in the 70s was like, wait a minute, this system, because he one of the few things, or well, the lesser known works he did was he wrote a Cliff Notes book. I think it's Spark Notes or Monarch Notes. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So that in the 70s, before he was an author writing his own books, he worked as a copywriter, and in this case, he did like a Cliff Notes type book. And I just thought it was funny because at that time, he's like working in the asylum of schooling in New York City. So I'm sure it wasn't like a real stretch to just apply that to that screenplay.
Oh, okay.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which
Right.
I think was a book prior to that, written in the 50s.
Yeah,
But
I'm sure it was.
yeah.
I'm not familiar with the book, but yeah.
Okay, so One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is a 1976-ish
Well,
movie
I've
with
seen the movie.
Jack Nicholson. Okay, right on.
Yeah, I've seen the movie. Yeah.
All right, cool.
But I don't know anything about the book, and
You're
know
old
how
enough to know
accurate
that
the movie
movie.
was. Barely. Don't let the gray hair fool you.
I like to spend a lot of time learning about what happened before I got here. You know.
Yeah, I feel you. I seem to
especially
spend a
with
lot of
like
time
music.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up listening to classic rock. You know, my parents were really big, and my dad, a big Yes fan, Pink Floyd, like you said, Rush. You know, and so yeah, I learned a lot about music. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about your upcoming project, but before we get to that, I want to give you an opportunity to tell what is your favorite John Taylor Gatto story out of all the time you got to spend with him.
That's a good question. I think I would have liked more time to prepare for that so I could sort through the ones that are like publicly tellable. Let me think. Okay, so yeah, see, if I tell you the story without the names, it doesn't. But it was pretty interesting. You would have known the names in that story. We can't tell you that one. The other one that I alluded to on Mance's show was when he was at Cornell with his roommate.
Uh-huh.
Those are some pretty interesting. So there was a couple of those. There was, but I shouldn't tell those either. Those are probably not good to tell.
Okay, yeah, I should have given you a heads up on this.
No. The good thing is I got a lot of good memories about our relationship over the years. And okay, so the message that he was trying to drive home about how schools interfere with children. Let's go with this idea. It was one of the last times that I was there visiting him, probably in the last 2 years, and he was talking about at the age when kids really need to solidify their relationship with their parents, they're brought into kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And this dynamic of having the parents already separated, going to work, and now the kids taken into the schooling system. He's like, they basically had figured out that, yeah, you can have your kids stay at home till they're like 3 or 4, but times they're 4 and 5, 6, you got to get them into the indoctrination.
Yeah.
So he thought it was important. He wasn't saying to like homeschool your kids, or like, I'm sure that these ideas are there for people who are free to choose them. But he's just saying like for those formative years, that those are the most important years for families to be bonding. And that, like, if you spend all your time not bonding during those years and you try to come back and have a relationship when the kids are in school, you're going to be fighting for the attention because the school's the authority at that point, right? So if you can, even if your kids do go to school, if you can keep them with you as long as you can and form this bond, that's the thing that schooling really broke. And then the rest of the time of schooling just exaggerates and, like, widens that chasm. But that the key was taking kids at this young age and getting them into a compulsory system where they're surrounded by involuntary interactions, people, activities, and like break their will. It's like harnessing and breaking their will.
Right.
So we can take a look at that. I've seen it recently, like little kids playing together. What's the first thing they're doing? Oh, they're playing classroom. Okay, well, how's that work? Everyone's got to sit and do what the teacher says. You got to raise your hand to go to the bathroom. Rules, rules, rules. I'm like, you guys are like 5. Like, this shouldn't be going on like this, right? And you guys shouldn't be buying into it. You sitting on the floor, you kids shouldn't be buying into raising your hand. If you got to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. It's right there. Do you have to ask to come back in the classroom? No, you just have to ask to leave. What's that all about? Right? So there's all these little things, and they just get indoctrinated, and then they are going to parrot it for the rest of their life, just like the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
I was doing Pledge of Allegiance before I knew what those words meant.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Exactly.
That's not, it's like, what's that all about? How long have we had that? Why did it come into our system? This is what Gatto would say. What's the history of these institutions and these activities? And then you'd see, oh, well, we haven't done this the whole time. And back in the 20s, people used to hold their hands up like Hitler and do the salute to the flag. Right? Really? You can just look up on Google. Yeah, if you look up early flag salutes in America, in fact, up until World War II, the swastika was used all over the place. There was, I think there was a U.S. hockey team, like an Olympic hockey team that had a swastika logo. There was Rudyard Kipling's books, when he printed his books, and he's a Mason friend of Cecil Rhodes, South Africa type guy. Kipling had swastikas on his books. I think they're the opposite way, though, because it is a piece, like a sun sign in Hinduism and India, right? So it has, I think it's Sanskrit maybe, a long history, which then got propagandized and corrupted and used to brand the Nazis, right? Yeah. So that's also interesting how they take this symbol that was probably positive, they made it into the epitome of evil.
Yeah, very clever branding on that part. I thought I heard somewhere that the original meaning of the swastika was like enlightenment or something like that, and it came out of ancient Persia or something like that. You might be right when you say India. I don't remember exactly. I remember hearing about it at some point, though. It was actually a positive symbol that Hitler appropriated and used as a propaganda tool. And I can't be certain because I haven't looked this up for years, but I think it was the 1916 women's hockey team that had the swastikas on their sweaters. And I had a picture of it at one point because I had researched it for something I had written like 10 years ago, 15 years ago now. But I found all these usages. So I was like, all these things that got branded as Nazism actually had a different disparate use, and they were brought to task to brand out the Nazi, right? The Nazi threat that was funded by the West. Yeah. Tailor-made enemies. Yeah. That should be a lesson. That's another story all in itself. Enemies made to order. Yeah, that's another episode. Yeah, no doubt. Wait, and you Gatto story that the stories that he told us after we filmed the Ultimate History lesson, when we were just sitting around talking at the kitchen table in my house. I would have to go back and watch what the specifics were, but that was just just like a cool time because it's like we've already done the substantial work, and now we're just gonna have some food and hang out. And this guy, we get to interact with him without anyone else interrupting, and so just getting to spend quality time with a guy who knew a lot and had seen a lot, had thought a lot about these things, and wanted to offer that valuable information to other people who were thirsty for knowledge. Yeah. When you were talking about having to ask to go to the bathroom and this, that, and the other in school, in December I did an episode, and I did a solo episode, and I kind of talked about this and where the education system came from, and it was inspired by your Ultimate History lesson. And it was a short episode, but I told a story of a 7-year-old boy who had a bladder problem, and he would always ask the teacher to go to the bathroom. And the teacher wouldn't allow him to go to the bathroom, and he ended up peeing on himself. And no matter how many doctor's notes the parents got, no matter what they did, the boy ended up peeing on himself almost every day for months on end because it was expected for him to comply more than it was expected for him to have any self-esteem or not get picked on or anything like that. And he had no autonomy. And it's just ridiculous that the school system will put a child at such an impressionable age through such a trauma just to teach
And
them
that entire
to obey.
system, yeah, that entire system. Did any teachers go on strike because of that? Who helped to defend him? He's the guy that
Right.
needed defended in that situation, not the system.
Exactly.
The system was going to be fine. Who stuck up for that kid? Who said that his teacher was out of line? Anybody?
His dad.
Then yeah, just his dad probably, right?
dad.
So that's atrocious, but that's unfortunately that's going on. I'd say like 80%, not that exact situation, but just situations like that. Their autonomy has been stripped. They have to be obedient. They're learning the helplessness. They're having no self-esteem, right? Except when the teacher gives them a gold star or whatever, right? Hocus pocus they do. Yeah. So the school system is made to be broken. It's not going to fix itself. The only way we can have people get fixed is for them to fix themselves. And if the students aren't going to the school system and they're getting education someplace else, then the school system becomes obsolete.
Right.
Problem solves itself.
All right, now we're running a little bit short on time now because I know you gotta get going. You got somewhere to be, and I don't want to keep you, but I want to give you a chance just to discuss your website and all the things that you're doing to help people discover their own autonomy and what the projects you have going on this year.
All right, so my website is tragedyandhope.com. Like I said, it hasn't been updated in a while. What I do update is my Patreon page. It seems to be easier for people to interact and just get the stuff on Patreon. That's why I've maintained it. So it's patreon.com/tragedyandhope. And my current project is for current and previous subscribers. I'm offering beta enrollment in a course I'm teaching called Autonomy. And the curriculum is designed to ignite the potential that the school system was supposed to amputate and cauterize. It's still there. You could still ignite your potential, and it's a series of steps that lead you into learning high-value skills. The high-value skills help you eliminate scarcity and fear in your life and allow you to start learning and taking actions to write your own ticket in life, to write your own script in life, where you don't need permission to take action. You want to do something, you know how to put together the funding for it, and you can take action. So either, people who are successful and they just want to gain a slight advantage, they're in the course. People who are starting at zero, they've never had a job and don't have any prospects, they're in the course. And people who are starting at less than zero, they've had a bunch of different failures, they're in debt, they don't have a plan, they don't know how they're going to figure it out. There are tools for them in the course. That's what the course is designed to do, is deliver autonomy to people who have been victimized by the school system, victimized by the situation in government. And one of the first steps in the curriculum is how to drop that victim mentality and fill that area with useful skills that allow you to pay the bills, to grow, to thrive, and to succeed in life using methods, principles, strategies, tactics, expert interviews, lectures, interactive public speaking, communication building exercises with your fellow students. So it's not just you take the course and click some videos and go through. It's fully interactive, and it contains the entire recipe. And if you apply your time and your potential, you can get the most out of that recipe. And the recipe is a lot more substantial life, a lot more ability to be present and not be worried or anxious or confused. And life's going to throw challenges at you every day. You're going to be overwhelmed. But what you can learn is that you can use those overwhelming times to learn. And that's just a habit that you can develop. And then things go a lot smoother. You're not like, shucks, every time something goes on. You're just like, all right, no big deal. Let me just do this. And I'm back on track and I'm making my next action toward my goal. So there's a structure for success that was taken out of the schooling system. It wasn't totally coherent and existing, but the components were there. People used to be able to get to a certain age, support themselves, have enough money for what they're doing, maybe have some money for charity to help people out, right? But the way things are today with the school system, it's all scarcity. You're locked into a job with no future that could be outsourced at any time. There's a lot of uncertainty. You're not making enough money at the job to pay the bills that are ever increasing. All the prices are going up. So it just drives this whole people need to work harder but they're not working smarter because they've never been given the opportunities to work smarter. What I thought was, hey, wouldn't it be cool? What would it look like? What would the world look like? What would all my subscribers and listeners look like if they had the advantage of having these skills and tools and principles and methods at their beck and call to apply however they want in their life? But more importantly, they would know that they have more options. So it's like there's an entire menu, but we've only been shown the hamburger. We're like, everyone has to be an employee. And I'm saying there's a whole spectrum of things you can do that could be the highest and highest and best uses of your time, but most people don't ever get that chance to see that part. And I've already, so I'm 1 week into the lecture series. It's probably going to go about 10 weeks. And I've already had people that are highly paid professionals, but they're employees. And they've said, I realized during the first lecture that I don't want to be an employee and I'm going to make a change. And I just encourage them, let's make sure we plan out that change and you just don't like go to work tomorrow and quit and you don't have, figured out. But people are already figuring out they would have made other choices in their life had they been given these wider spectrum of options that I'm presenting. And I'm telling them it's not too late now. And I'm telling them we can develop a plan to get them from A to B, from wherever they are to wherever they want to be. And thus far, everybody's having a good time. And I did a live Q&A yesterday, and that's the metaphor. A live presentation on Friday. I post the replay on Saturday, and on Sunday I do the live Q&A. That way, anyone in Europe that was asleep during the lecture gets a chance while they're awake to ask questions and talk to me. So that's like my primary focus right now, and for like the next 10 weeks.
All right. I know one more question. I know that at least one of my kids listens to my podcast. If you had a message for teenagers, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, what is your message to them?
Literacy is a form of slavery until a methodology of critical thinking is consistently applied by the reader. What does that mean? It means words are going to control you and your life until you learn how to critically think about those words, discern the signal, that which is true, from the noise, that which is false, illusionary propaganda. Focusing on the signal is where success lies. It lets you go ahead. But if you get distracted with the noise, then things go haywire. So literacy, as it works, it enslaves people until you know how to think critically about what you're reading. I could show you a sign on the wall. It's like, danger, high voltage, don't touch this doorknob. And you won't leave the room because you believe that sign. But if it's not true, if that sign is not true, then you can touch the doorknob and you can go through that door. That's a lot like how the school system sets it up. They're like, don't go, success is through this door, but danger, high voltage. And we believe them. Oh, we need the security of being an employee. And if you want to be an employee and that's the highest and best use of your time, go for it. But I see a lot of people working for big corporations like Home Depot or Walmart and these types of things, and it's not rewarding, and they're not like living in their dreams, and they're spending a lot of time, energy, and effort. I'm just saying, hey, stop spinning your wheels, get the knowledge and the experience that gives you traction, learn how to steer your own wheels and not just go on this path that they went, and you can go off the trail, right? So you can go anywhere you want to, and you can learn how to do that. And being able to apply that in your life in whichever way you want to is what I call autonomy. It's to live freely. That's what we're all trying to do, right?
That's right. Well, Richard, our time's up, man. And I am so happy that you took the time to be here with me. I appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate it, Tommy. And next time you're riding down the road in your truck, hit up the Peace Revolution podcast. Try out episode 93 on, what is it? 93 is libertarian philosophy. That's like the history of it and evolution. And the next episode, which I'm currently in the production for now, is how that philosophy of liberty and economics is put into reality through business and entrepreneurism. That's why the course is between the two episodes. You see, I'm bridging that gap with something real.
Right.
Yeah, check it out. The other one that people like is episode 23, How to Free Your Mind. If you got kids of the teenage years, try that out. It'll elaborate upon what I just said. It'll make it less vague, much more specific and usable in their lives.
All right, brother. Well, I appreciate it. I hope we can do it again.
Thank you, Tommy. It was a very rewarding use of my time, and you have yourself an outstanding day.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you later.
Right on.
That was Stranger Encounters with Richard Grove. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm Tommy Salmons. Late.